I fell into the fight against injustice. When I was in college, I studied to be an English teacher, and like anybody trying to find themselves, English teachers, history teachers, psychology majors, a job was hard to find. So I became a teaching assistant on somebody's advice, and I ended up in an alternative school. And I remember for behavior disorder and emotionally disturbed kids. I remember the first day talking to another teaching assistant, and she told me that there are people who are passing through in environments like this, and there are lifers. And she had been there 5 years, she was a lifer. I admired that, but I was not a lifer. I was here to get experience and get an English job. And through the 5 months that I was there before I started applying for English jobs, I went through the gamut and learned a whole ton. I was attacked while playing basketball and had to decide whether to press charges against a young man or to have him kicked out of school. And we ended up suspending him for 10 days because that was the maximum, and the police officer who arrested him for attacking a teacher brought him into the school and said the only reason he wasn't behind bars was because of me. And the connection that created with the kid allowed me to speak truth into his life. He was a real angry kid who had a bunch of cigarette burns on his arms. His dad left when he was young. His mom got high with him and drank with him. And as young kids of that generation, this generation do, he wanted to get a big tattoo across his shoulder blades. And originally he was going to get revenge. And his social worker and I said, not against tattoos, but revenge is something that you don't want to carry a burden of. And so one day he came in and said, "Hey, Mr. Meister, you want to see my tattoo?" And like I said yes, not realizing what that entailed. So the young man took his shirt off in the middle of class to show freedom etched across his back. And because of the pain and the things that we went through together, he was able to accomplish that. The people who report to alternative schools where kids are, cussing you out and running out of class and flipping desks and throwing books, the people who report to, mental hospitals and juvenile prisons, that, it's where you take your life into your hands. I was attacked 5 times in 2017, off of work for 3 months, suffered 2 concussions and PTSD. We don't keep running into that because, we don't like the kids or don't want to help or don't want to change. This is the best life that they're going to have for 3, 6, 9 months. That's the best life they're going to have. So they come from poverty, and the other thing is they come from broken homes. Probably about 30% of the kids talk about that dad or uncle or mom or all of them are in prison, have been in prison, something like that. And so you don't have a support system that is around, and it takes a village to raise a child. So inside the home, you don't have the support system, but then you go on to the community of broken homes and poverty, and you don't have the resources in the church, in the local park district or fitness center or boys and girls club. There's just not enough people around to save these kids. I taught 6 years in juvenile justice, and I gave up teaching subjects. I loved my mentor's saying, and he said that he used to teach life in the context of history, math, science, and English, because these kids didn't come into our facilities because they failed a school subject. They came in because they failed at life, and we have to teach them how to survive. What we're doing is saving lives. And the toughest part about pushing school and pushing for them to do the right thing in our eyes is that the right thing will get them beaten, killed, ostracized, and that's something that we have a hard time wrapping our heads around. That took a long time. That's where I came up with the middle of the pack philosophy, where kids don't need to be the front of the gang and try to be the leader and the head honcho, but at the same time can't fall to the back, because that's really, really dangerous, and somehow they hide in the middle until they find their way out. And that's the tragedy of, we hear about we're the wealthiest, most prosperous country in the history of the world, but we have an entire population of people who have to make it out in order to be successful. So essentially we're asking these kids, these people, to leave their family, to leave their community, to leave everything they know permanently in order to find success in life. And the people who can do that are few and far between. Each of us has a different view, but until we see the whole big picture, we're not going to be able to make change. So reserve that judgment, reserve that anger, and really look behind it to what the solution is. If you're open to getting to know these kids, these offenders, as people. And I like that, they're not called inmates anymore, we call them youth, and they try to soften some of the language around them to kind of humanize them, because they are. We get to see them because of the worst moment that happened in their life, but that worst moment shouldn't dictate everything about them. One of the best youths that I got to deal with was facing juvenile life because they murdered a family member, and was one of the sweetest, most respectful people that I had gotten to interact with. Graduated high school early, is taking college classes, is essentially a minor staff member because of just their manners and their upbringing, and it was just cool to see that one moment should not dictate the rest of their lives. On the nice side of things. On the other side of things, one of the reasons I wrote my book, The Throwaway Kids, is to detail what it is like in some of these teaching environments for young teachers. I did a conference where I got to be a keynote speaker, and there were 500 teachers for kids with emotional and social disabilities, and I asked them how many people went to college to become a teacher for kids with social and emotional disabilities. Not one person raised their hand. We all accidentally come into this, and you can be the first generation who purposely goes out and wants to teach kids who get kicked out of their regular school, that go to an alternative school, who are in a mental health facility, or who are in a prison. You can do that as a teacher, you can do that as a security guard, as a counselor, as a social worker. Any of those things, dealing with those kids is great. For those of us who are not on that career path, and it's just not built for us, again, it's not built for most people. I go and help the people who are built for this, because we're few and far between. Mentoring, contacting your local state corrections facility or county corrections facility, and just asking how you can volunteer or mentor, connecting with church organizations that go in. It means the world to the adult and the kid population to have outsiders who come in and deal with them and care for them. When I first started, I burnt out hard because I thought, I was a superhero and I can save these kids. And the reality of it is, I talk about it like spokes on a wheel, that it took 20 to 50 people that let these kids down, that broke them, and it's going to take 20 to 50 people to fix them. And I'm just one spoke on the wheel. And you can be a spoke on the wheel by dealing with this population and just giving them a benefit of the doubt. Just because they assaulted or murdered or, whatever it is, those are harsh words, but it doesn't mean that they're going to do it to you. So giving them the benefit of the doubt, they are human, and mentoring is a big thing. Helping out with broken families. If you see a single mom who's dealing with kids, give her some help. Come and offer to do a cleaning project if you're good with kids. Babysit, especially mentor in churches and in areas that are affected by poverty. You can find these same kids that can matriculate to juvenile or adult facilities, and you can head them off at the pass and be one of those people that supported the wheel before they crumbled. And one of the reasons I intentionally wore my Superman shirt today is because very quickly getting into the juvenile facility, the kids started calling me Superman because I always wear superhero t-shirts. We can't talk about God in state correction settings and in schools, but we can wear messianic symbols of hope, of justice, of righteousness, and get the kids to dream bigger about it. Tragically, these kids don't have a lot of role models in their lives, but everybody wants to be a superhero, and so we can teach character traits and how to socialize through those sort of things. Lastly, just be an impact to those around you. There was a quote by C.S. Lewis that I can't remember the exact quote, but it talked about rushing past interruptions. But C.S. Lewis said these are life. the simple way that you interact with everybody who is around you has a rippling effect. I've gone into a number of toxic environments, and one of my favorite things to tell people is that I'm living the dream. And it brings up discussions, but if you ever tell, somebody, the average answer because of media and because of disappointment in life is I'm okay or whatever. And whenever you ask somebody, it's always a bring me down. But if you're living the dream, if you're over the top, if you can create that positivity in life, it's contagious. In my facility, even people who would argue, you can't be living the dream, you work in a corrections setting or you work in a mental hospital, I would teach them about the law of duality that says you can't appreciate light without darkness or hot without cold. And so because of the pain and the misery that we see on a daily basis, we actually are blessed and can experience that much joy. And so I'm living the dream because of it. So just be an upbeat attitude in your home, in your workplace, in your church, and that will have a rippling effect that will affect the rest of our world.